Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be covering a very personal and serious subject, but it's also because of this book, Adoption and Suicidality. It's a very personal subject because I've been very open about my own suicidal thoughts and suicide attempts on this channel in order to help other adoptees that may have been suicidal. And the more research that comes out and the more books and more facts and evidence that I read from other adoptees, suicide among adoptees is a much greater risk than biological children being raised by their biological families. And it's just very important to cover. I know it's an uncomfortable thing to talk about, and it goes directly against the narrative that it's a win-win for everybody and we should be grateful and we're getting a better life. And you know, some people are just very closed off to it. But I started this channel because of how isolated I was. I was adopted in the 80s, and then there was no competent adoption therapist that I went to. In my entire 40 years on this planet, there was not one adoption competent therapist that I went to. And I didn't even know, like, there was no thought like, hey, I need to go see a therapist that knows about adoption. I just thought professionals knew about all trauma. I thought they were trained and specialized in all trauma, and that one professional would know that, hey, yeah, being separated from your family can cause this and this and this. Maternal separation can cause this and this and this. And I thought that that was just part of professional training, but I was very wrong. And I know that other adoptees can have this exact same experience. So it's very important to talk about suicide on this channel because we have like very little resources and very few professionals who know, and even adopted parents. And I'm not trying to shame anybody. I'm not trying to point the finger. It's the system of adoption. If you look at the history and listen to adult adoptees, there's very little resources to help adoptees when we are children, and the uninformed APs that really want the best for their adopted children, but they don't really know how to meet the needs and the amount of failed adoptions. It confuses me and baffles me, and I'm blown away by the lack of resources that we have as adoptees. So I know I kind of went all over the place on that, but I wanted to read from this book, Adoption and Suicidality. It's one of the best books. I think that an adoptee that has suicidal thoughts, or a family that is raising an adoptee that has suicidal thoughts, or a therapist that's working with an adoptee that has suicidal thoughts can read, because it's so complex, and the system of adoption is so ingrained in our society that, you know, it's not really thought about to think anything scary can happen from adoption. Like, so I'm just gonna read the back of this book. Is so vital to read, so I'm just gonna read it. It's from Unraveling Adoption book series, volume 1. It's the first book in the series. It says, this book is a wake-up call to those impacted by adoption and to those who interact with them. According to preliminary results of a groundbreaking study out of Winston-Salem State University, final report targeted for release in 2025, adopted people are 36.7 times more likely to attempt suicide than their non-adopted peers, and birth-first mothers are 40 times more likely to attempt suicide than non-relinquishing women. After you read this book, please share it with someone else you know who needs to understand this intersection between adoption and suicidality. We hope this book will literally save lives. That's honestly the only reason why I started this channel. I literally want to help save lives. If you or someone you know is struggling with suicidal thoughts, please call 988 in the US or the equivalent in your country and reach out to others in the adoption community. Stay safe. Now, this is part of the foreword. This is from there's a foreword by Dr. Joyce McGuire Pavio, sorry if I ruined your name. This is just part of it. I highly urge you to read this whole book, but This is page 11. Adoption and suicidality. Adoptees are often blamed and labeled as the problem, but it is the adoption system that is detrimental to all involved. The grim statistics about adoptees attempting suicides at 4 times the rate of their non-adopted peers says more about the system of adoption and its impact on the child and families than it does the one's child's mental illness. We're so quick to label the child with RAD or attachment disorder, but this book is expansive with its inclusion of multiple voices from different roles in the constellation, and the title now matches. The key to managing extreme anxiety and depression, which can be precursors to suicidality, is regulation. The adults surrounding anxious and or depressed children, teens, and young adults must learn to co-regulate and to manage their own nervous system's regulation. The adopted child arrives in the adoptive home with loss and trauma. This is often very denied by everybody. We often do not know what happened while in utero. An adopted child's birth mother possibly struggled with things like internal conflict, domestic violence with a partner or family member, emotionally cut off during the pregnancy, or lack of resources or support to make a true choice. Then the adopted child must grieve the loss of the birth mother after relinquishing when they are placed in foster care, an orphanage, or an adoptive kinship home. Some adopted children have had additional moves from being shuttled from foster carer to foster carer. By the time the child arrives at their permanent placement, which may or may not be permanent in the long run, the adopted parent often has no idea what the child has been through. The adopted parents don't always have the natural ability, wherewithal, resources, or desires to attend to their child's intense needs, post-trauma, and loss. But all of the adults involved by birth and by adoption, leaning on adoption-attuned professionals, are encouraged to put their own egos and needs aside to be the best parent they can be to this particular child. This is where we could start. Now that's just the first little section of the foreword. I highly recommend you guys go get this book. Being an adoptee myself, a transracial adoptee, being the only one adopted out of my family, being a Chicano in a white family raised from infancy in a racist part of Georgia was extremely isolating. I wanted to kill myself probably from the age of 10, 11 to 38. I had a horrible drinking problem. If I had anybody that was competent in adoption that could actually acknowledge the 7 core issues of adoption and permanency and adoption and suicidality, if I had any competency in the professional therapist that I went to, I think my suicide attempts would not have happened at all, because all I needed was that validation that, hey, yeah, there is loss and trauma, and not, hey, there's no loss, you're being ungrateful. That is ridiculous. So I really hope this helps, and I will see you in the next video.